Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations. This is BJJ Meditations episode number 79. I'm your host, Joe Hannon, Joe from Jersey. I think I'm going to call this episode Departure. Why? Because I'm leaving for Vegas tomorrow. This is the part of the show where I do a brief recap of my training camp. I think I'll stick with that format. How am I doing? I'm light, both literally and psychologically. The weight I lost after that stomach ailment has not come back. I wanted to be around 190 pounds without the gi on leading into this competition. I'm about 186 or 87, depending on, I guess, water intake the day prior. So a little light. I still think I'm heavier than I was last year going into this competition, so that's fine. I just can't cut down to middleweight. It doesn't work for me anymore. I just don't have the weight to spare. So I'm going to be fighting with rocks in my pocket. Just kidding. Just kidding. IBJJF, no rocks. I'll be wearing most likely my show-you-roll IBJJF legal gi, which of course does not have pockets. Or I had ordered a backup gi from Kiko. They had this sale, $90, get yourself a light gi. Ordered expedited shipping, was supposed to be here in 2 business days, and I'm leaving tomorrow, and it's not here yet. So I think I ordered it Thursday. Maybe you find yourself in the same situation. If you're out there and you got suckered in by the same deal and you don't have your gi, I'd love to hear from you. You can write me at bjjmeditations@gmail.com. But anyway, one of my good friends, Brandon, student at the school, training partner at the school, fellow teacher at the school, messaged me after the last episode, and he said, you sound like you're feeling kind of light, Joe. You sound like you're feeling upbeat. And I said, yes, I am. And I think that's going to be sort of the grist for this episode. Why that change? Light physically, self-explanatory. That's what happens when you puke and shit your brains out. Light emotionally is a different thing for me entirely. It's interesting. The nerves always tend to arrive in one solid rush. It's like a dam breaks somewhere, and they take some time to get downstream, but they finally show up in a big tidal wave. And this time, it wasn't really a tidal wave. I recall the moment I was out driving. I think I was picking up my son from school, and my mind went into autopilot mode, visualizing the what-ifs of a match. And rather than this tidal wave, it's usually a tidal wave coming and crashing down on me, it was sort of like I was sitting on a surfboard out on the ocean, and a bump passed under me. One of those low rollers that crops up when a set is about to come in, sometimes at the Jersey Shore. That's what it felt like. Like, oh, there it is. Here it comes. Here comes something of import. But I don't feel displaced by it. Everything feels a lot less intense. It feels like there's a lot more space between it. And it feels like things are occurring behind schedule. Usually the terror sets in well in advance of the event and hasn't set in yet. So that's cool. And this is literally a departure. It's a change of pace for me. And it's coming on the heels of another literal departure as I prepare to head to Newark Airport tomorrow morning. My flight is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I believe I'm due to arrive in Vegas at 3 o'clock local time. The time change going out is certainly better than the time change going back. Generally speaking, I sleep pretty well the night before these things. There's almost a sense of relief that the day is here, finally, the much awaited for day. And there's also a sense of relief when the journey finally begins. Nothing feels as good as when I'm traveling to a competition, when I get into my car in the early morning and I start it. Oh, man. Okay, finally, we're underway. The motor is running. We're reaching operating temperature. So I look forward to that moment tomorrow. And of course, Worlds is just a completely different beast. For those of you who haven't done it before, there's a real celebratory energy to it. Like, for example, I saw the IBJJF put out a post on Instagram last night listing all the people who will be receiving coral and red belts this year. Generally speaking, it feels much more like a party. And I think some of that's due to the fact that it is in Las Vegas, which is the party mecca of the universe, arguably, the known universe anyway. But some of it too is just that it's a master's level tournament for the most part. Sure, there's Jiu-Jitsu Con and there are adults and kids competing, but few of the people who are competing at Masters Worlds are trying to make a career out of it. There are certainly lifers, especially in my division. For example, I saw Marcos Tinoco is in my bracket, which the last time I rolled with Marcos, it was in 2019 at Marcelo's, and he caught me in his flash shotgun armbar, which is like a signature move of his. And it probably took me about a year and a half before my elbow felt right again. So that's kind of in the back of my brain as the possibility of fighting him looms large. But again, not in some terrifying, overwhelming way. It's the sense of, wow, the sport has evolved so much in such a relatively short period of time that it can take over the better part of the convention center in Las Vegas. And people come from all over the world and they bring this incredible positive energy into the event that's contagious. I can't recall losing and feeling so happy as I did last year after my fight. But anyway, like, I'm looking forward to this in a way that I haven't looked forward to a competition maybe ever. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that I'm at this point of transition in my life. And what that point of transition is, I can't really say. It feels similar to the time I spent waiting for my son Cormac to be born, where there was this landmark sort of occasion looming on the horizon, and I knew that I would be somebody different on the other side of it, but I didn't really know who that person would be. And I feel very strongly that there's something on par with that waiting for me in Las Vegas and beyond. And last year, I didn't feel that. Last year, it was more the nervous energy and also sort of this blindness to the reality of what I was about to do. I was extremely naive last year. You know, I had taken a couple of years off due to the pandemic, due to becoming a dad for my IBJJF competition. And I signed up for Worlds as a brown belt, thinking I would go and compete as a brown belt. And a few months later, Emily and Shane asked me if I wanted my black belt. And there was a real strong reaction in me to retreat and delay another year because I knew I wasn't ready for that level of competition. I knew that intellectually. I didn't know that sort of physiologically in an embodied sort of way. But I decided ultimately to accept it because if they thought I was ready for it, then I must have been ready for it. Emily and Shane's standards are so high, they would never give a belt to somebody who wasn't ready to wear it. So I accepted, and I went to my first jiu-jitsu competition essentially in 3 years or 2 years as a black belt. And I went up against this guy, I forget his name. I want to say his name was Sam something. He was a blonde dude from Texas, taller than me. And I think he was ranked maybe 10th in the bracket. And, I had no points under my belt, so I was very close to the bottom of the bracket. And, it was an okay match. He ended up submitting me. But I just felt like I had been hit by a tornado or something like that. Just this massive force of nature had run through me. And I was left simultaneously sitting in awe of what jiu-jitsu had become and stunned by how unprepared I was for what I experienced. And this year I don't feel that way. I can look at a guy like Marcos and I'm like, yeah, this is a guy who's a legitimate world champion. Pretty sure he's a world champion of some sort. Either way, fierce competitor, super accomplished, has done far more than I have. And I can see all that, and there's like a healthy distance between me and all that information. And I'm wondering, what is that about? And in so many ways, I feel like I'm a completely different person than I was a year ago. A lot has come to pass in the year since. And I feel kind of hardened as a result of all of that. And when I look back at the past year, from last August to this August, I kind of see that ass whooping I took in Las Vegas as the beginning of that hardening. And I say hardening, and I don't mean that like in a negative sense. Like, I don't feel walled off from the world. I don't feel reticent or nihilistic or anything like that. If anything, like I'm allowing myself to feel things more intensely, which is a lot for me. I feel more open to my family, for example. I feel more open to the people I'm closest with. But there's an armor on me is sort of that's been built up by this process. I was looking at my black belt the other day, for example, and it's falling apart. And this is the black belt I wore last year in competition, and I couldn't, if I wanted to compete in it this year, it wouldn't pass uniform inspection in IBJJF. And that's not because I train an inordinate amount. Like there are people who certainly train more than me. Probably because I wash my belt every time I train. But it was a good reminder of how far I've come, both personally and as a grappler. I've been studying hard, I've been training hard, and I have far more tools than I had last year. Are they going to be enough? Is the training going to be enough? I don't know. It depends what the definition of enough is. If enough is winning a world championship, then TBD. There's always going to be somebody out there who is more skilled than I am. But if enough is this level of radical self-acceptance that I'm kind of inching toward, then yeah, I think I'm on the path. And as I've stated multiple times on this podcast, it is my goal to be a world champion someday. I don't know if I'm going to get there, but the difference between I'd say who I was a year ago and who I am now is that I'm truly okay if it never happens. I'm better than okay. My life is great. And I think I'm engaged more directly and perhaps more efficiently with that process than I have been prior. Feels great. I'm more confident in who I am and sort of what I bring to the world. And I'm more confident in my ability to survive things. As I've sort of alluded to on this podcast, I've been through some shit. I mean, there are plenty of people out there who have been through more hardship than I have, but I've kind of proved to myself that I have this ability to endure. I'm more confident in my survival skills, and I look forward to the opportunity to demonstrate all that when I get to Las Vegas in a couple days here. I've been really enjoying this book by Haruki Murakami. He's a Japanese novelist, one of my favorite novelists in general. It's called Novelist as Vocation, and it's sort of been this return for me, this remembering that writing is an important part of who I am, and it's an important part of how I express myself, and it's sort of been an area of emphasis in my life that has slackened off a little bit, and one that I plan on returning to after Worlds, which is sort of why I'm reading it as a primer of sorts. And I wanted to share this line with you all that struck me quite hard last night as I was reading it. Murakami writes, "This is purely my opinion, but if you want to express yourself as freely as you can, it's probably best not to start out by asking, 'What am I seeking?' Rather, it's better to ask, 'Who would I be if I weren't seeking anything?' and try to visualize that aspect of yourself. Asking, 'What am I seeking?' invariably leads you to ponder heavy issues. The heavier that discussion gets, the farther freedom retreats, and the slower your footwork becomes. The slower your footwork, the less lively your prose. When that happens, your writing won't charm anyone, possibly even you." Now, substitute the word footwork and the word prose with Jiu-Jitsu, and I think the truth remains. What am I after? That same freedom of self-expression. And I think it only comes from, as Murakami says, this surrender of the seeking instinct, this jettisoning of that feeling. We are all sort of here on this path of transformation, but I think we have this tendency to kind of get in our own way. Transformation is one thing, self-improvement is quite another, and I don't think self-improvement is real, as I've talked about on this podcast, previous episodes, specifically as Alan Watts has pointed out. So it begs me to question, what am I seeking? How do I put that down? And how do I truly embrace that freedom that Murakami describes? And I think, I was up early writing this morning because I'm back on the train. And I think today, freedom is a nap. Freedom is maybe the joyous hug that I get from Cormac when I pick him up at daycare every day. And maybe it's dinner with my family. The in-laws are coming tonight. They're going to be watching Cormac while Francis and I are in Vegas. And tomorrow, maybe freedom is musing in the airport lounge before the flight. One of my favorite things to do. But of course, tomorrow is never a given. So I'm going to try my best to put down that seeking instinct and just be content with what's here now. So if you are a listener of this podcast and you're at Masters Worlds, I'd love for you to say hello. I'd love to meet you. As I've said multiple times, this is kind of a one-sided conversation, and I know you're out there listening. I don't know who you are, and I would love to get a better sense of who you are and meet you. So if you see me, and it's after my match, which is Thursday at 2 p.m. local time, I believe, say hello. Let's talk. And, one more thing. I put something on Substack. I hadn't written something in a long time. This is sort of a prelude to Masters, a summation of 37 years of existence, and my current midlife crisis and how it all relates neatly to Jiu-Jitsu, of course. I'd love it if you could go over there and give it a read and subscribe if you enjoy it. I'm trying to build up a bit more of an audience there for more writing to come. It's joehannan.substack.com. That's Joehannan, JoeHannan.substack.com. Thank you very much for listening, folks. I'll be back next week with an update from Vegas, and I'll see you then.